So welcome back to part 2. We'll go straight into it because it's another lengthy, probably about 15 minutes long tutorial kind of update.
So the pillars are dry. Now it's time for some slight weathering. Now on most brick structures where the mortar and the lime deposits and the salt are leaking down, you get white streaks. And how I'm achieving that is by using some of the matte white acrylic paint. I've got some of it slightly here. Get some on the end of your brush. But the key is to take most of it off. So you're leaving a very small amount on your brush. And then with quick motion, in fact you can see there's probably too much, so I'll have to feather that out. Quick downward motions. And you can smudge it with your fingers just to blend it in. Now in my opinion these are still looking quite pristine. So what I intend to do is, like I've done on the top concrete sill, is to mucky them up because they're going to be under this bridge. The bridge is going to be filthy. It's not going to be cleaned. Big flat brush. All this is black acrylic paint, which has been sitting around for quite a while, hence why there's loads of specks, which I quite like because it adds to the detail. Mixed with water, and it's heavily mixed with water, so it is a wash. You're not painting this on, remember this is just staining it. And it's a case of slapping it on. You can see just there the specks of dirt which would accrue. Now this will dry, but it will dry in a kind of a stained fashion, which is exactly what you want. When the dirt washes down, it will be getting into those mortar lines, into that brickwork. And as I said, this isn't going to be clean because it's obviously underneath the bridge. And you can see there, compared to one that isn't done, if I can show you on the camera, once that dry, that'll be all murky and grimy. And will be in keeping with the real life. The underside of the bridge, whereas this is just black, I'm giving it some grimy brown. Mixing that brown into the black, because you don't want it just black, because it's very flat. And it's not very prototypical. So by mixing in some brown, and what I've got in here is predominantly brown paint. It looks black, but there is brown paint in there with a very small hint of black. And all I'm doing here is smearing it in, feathering it into the black. So that it all merges into one. Now I've got my trusty old black wash out. I'm using exactly the same brush that I've been using to paint the brown on the underside of the bridge. So I haven't washed it, I've just dunked it straight in. And whilst the paint's still wet, I'm putting on the wash and it blends all the black and the brown into one. So they're all weathered up. What I've also done is added some Javis, however you say it, some coarse grass in the areas where the joins weren't that great. These have been stuck down because it's going onto plastic. I've had to use the old UHU glue. You can see how the stain stained all the sills and got into the brickwork. There's different gradients of weathering, so some have got quite a lot of dirt, that one in particular, Some of it's got quite bad staining from all the lime and the salt from dripping down. So along the actual sides of the girders, I'm putting a base layer. Obviously it's been primed with white primer. And what I'm doing is putting a initial coat of weathering powders, which I will then mask all up with random speckles. And then I'm going to airbrush over the final colour. I can then rub out the mascal, which has prevented the rust from being covered by the paint, which will then give the chipping effect that you see with the rust streaking down the girders and the flaking of the paint to give that weathered look. So that's what I'm doing here. So I've got 3 weathering powders. I've got iron oxide, rust and dark earth, and all it is a case of mixing matte coat with enamel thinners, spreading it on to the area, because this is the fixing agent which actually fixes the weathering powders down. And all I do is spread on each colour and then blend them in. Just adding some final details to the actual railing before we paint it. And I don't know if you can see here, but I've actually put some mesh in between this current railing. And what I've used here for this is this stuff. And this is plasterboard tape. And it's the stuff you use for joining plasterboard joints before it's been plastered. Self-adhesive, so it sticks to the railings. Now I might also add some glue just to make sure it doesn't fall off, but also these are going to be sprayed as well with the paint, so this paint should hold it as well. Next up is applying some Humbrol mascal, and it's like a liquid latex which you can then place over the rusted section, and then when that is on the actual bridge and then you give it the final spray, the spray won't cover the rust, if you get what I'm saying. Now there's a great video on this on the Humbrol YouTube video, on the Humbrol YouTube site, and he explains it far better than I do. But what I'm going to do is use his technique of using some scouring to get some random effects, and I've also got a sponge. And all you need to do is dip it into the mascal and then gently apply in the areas where there might be some rust. Now you've got to let that mascal dry for around 10 to 20 minutes, so it becomes that kind of latex, kind of liquidy consistency, so that when you do spray on, or like that if you're doing an airbrush, that it masks, which is why it's called mascal. It masks the undercoat. So we're going to come back to this in about 20 minutes. So it's time for spraying. I've decided to spray it with a can rather than airbrush. And what I'm going to be using is this one, which is Humbrol Brunswick Green, which is an acrylic spray. So remember, do this outside. So let's go outside. So this is it sprayed up. You can see it's covered the mascal. You can see where the mascal is because there's like indentations and bumps. And once this is dry, I'm going to rub it off and reveal the rust from underneath. So here I'm just picking off That's gone. You can see the rust coming from underneath. And then with some blue tack, good thing about this technique is you get a 3D look because of the flaking paint. Okay folks, so we're on to the streaking of the rust, and all we've got here is another little container of enamel thinners, and this is the reason why on the previous step where we applied the rust prior to this coat going on, that we applied it with some enamel thinners, because what you can do is you can reactivate those rust techniques, and you can add streaking effects or pooling at the bottom, very subtly, to give that impression that the rust has dripped down from the rain and has stained the rest of the girder. So the Alnahudy wash, the black wash, has gone on. That's blended it all together. So I'm just going to wait for that to dry, and then I can attach the pillars to the underside. The bridge is in position. All the pillars are screwed to the underside. There's a few tweaking that I need to do because I found out that the actual baseboard isn't completely level. So it rises up at the end there slightly, so I can taper that out as it comes down. And there's some slight alterations I've got to do just to make sure that the trains run freely. We can send the Class 68 over. So thanks for tuning in. Sorry it's been a long one, but it's taken me a long time to build the bridge. I'm very pleased with it, and overall it's my first scratch built piece of kit, and I'm very pleased. So once again, thanks for tuning in. If you like, please like. If you want to subscribe, please subscribe. If you want to leave any comments, leave comments below, negative or positive. And I'll catch you next time.